Hello, this is Willie from the Ozarks, and we are ready for Lesson 60 in A Course in Miracles Workbook for Students, which is a review lesson of the first 50 lessons. It's the last of the reviews. It'll be the review for lessons 46 through 50. Lesson yesterday, lesson 59. God goes with me wherever I go. God is my strength, vision is his gift. God is my source, I cannot see apart from him. God is the light in which I see. God is the mind with which I think. So that was yesterday's lesson. And, I ended up taking a real long nap. I guess I was tired, and I didn't get all my lessons done earlier during the day. So I just, it was a lazy day. And so I did what I told you. Sometimes I just set my timer for 2 minutes. I'll read the lesson. And since there's 5 of them, I did it several times because I hadn't done many of my lessons. I think I went ahead and did all 5 of them and then reset my timer for 2 minutes and did the next lesson. I know it's kind of trying to do things exactly the way he says, and he doesn't really tell us specifically not to consolidate them. I think he wants to do it throughout the day, but better to do it, all consolidated with just a moment of reading the next lesson and then taking 2-minute meditation. Do try to do it the way he says to do it, though, to the best of your ability. But what I'm trying to let you see is you can squeeze up a whole set of lessons up in just a few minutes. I happen to do that on lesson 59. Okay, lesson 60. Let's look at it one time before we read it. These ideas are for today's review, 46 through 50. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. I am sustained by the love of God. I threw in a few conjunctions. God is the love in which I forgive, as God is the strength in which I trust. So there's nothing to fear. And furthermore, God's voice speaks to me all through the day, so I am sustained by the love of God. So that one helped me a lot. We'll read that one again. Before we go on, let's take a look at what I've got here. I've got a Heritage Red Raspberry picked up at Garden Supply. Got a couple of them. And what I do when I get them home is I cut the bag open and go ahead and start watering them and give them a little water. It's a little early to put them out, but I like to go ahead and pick things up. You could put them out now, but if we get some frost, it'll knock this top growth that's coming on back, and I like to keep that going. So I try to keep them from being planted until it's most of the danger of frost over. These probably could withstand a little light frost and not hurt them. And if they did, it's no big deal. They're going to be able to come back. These are packed in a mulching material. They're not really, they're bare root seedling with just some moisture around them. And keep the moisture on, they put some shredded material on there, leaf litter or fine bark or something. Anyway, Heritage raspberries they say they're an ever-bearing red raspberry. They're a nice plump sweet berry, and they say they're ever-bearing, but what that means is they produce a pretty good crop in July is what I read, and then another crop in September until frost, and that's the bigger harvest that particular time. What else about them? It says they're self-supporting canes, and they grow in kind of a round form. I think it said about 5 foot. Anyway, do a little check to see how far apart to put them. I have heard that you don't want to put blackberries and red raspberries real close together. Leave them, I've heard, 50 feet or more apart, just because there's certain, I think it's a fungus that affects one that can get a good hold and then affect the other one. If you keep them a little further apart, that's not as big an issue as what I understand. I'm not sure. Check me out on that too. All right, you come to this class to learn A Course in Miracles, but got to do a little show and tell, okay? All right, lesson 60. I want to point this is our last review, and then we'll be ready to go on to our next section in the course, which our next lesson is going to be lesson 61. I am the light. I am the light of the world. Okay, well, before we go to that, I wanted to say I had a couple that needed a place to stay, and they had found themselves in a church. It's been many years ago. And they found themselves at a church in Joplin. We're telling them all about how they had just encountered a little thin book that was the first 50 lessons in A Course in Miracles, which you all now have done the first 50 lessons. And that was all he needed. You know, he decided he was enlightened, at least to some degree. You hear his story. He was very much enlightened by those first 50. And I always wondered and he did come out here to stay at my farm, and him and his lady, they were wonderful, wonderful people that were on their journey. And I always wondered through the years if he ever went back and did the other 315 lessons of A Course in Miracles, or whatever it was. Yeah. He did the first 50 anyway. And we know that there's assistance for all of us, and there's huge amounts of learning that have taken place already in these first 50 lessons. But let me encourage you to continue on. There's even more in store for us. I hope you've already found it very useful and very helpful. All right, now let's go on to lesson 60. These ideas are for today's review. God is the love in which I forgive. As God is the strength in which I trust, so there is nothing to fear. And furthermore, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. So I am sustained by the love of God. That was me throwing in a few words there with it. All right. So review lesson 46. God is the love in which I forgive. God does not forgive. God does not forgive, because he has never condemned. Wow, there's a picture of God that may be new to a lot of us. God does not forgive because he has never condemned. Pure love. Pure love hadn't made any condemnations towards his beloved child, us. The blameless cannot blame, and those who have accepted their innocence see nothing to forgive. Yet forgiveness is the means by which I will recognize my innocence. Forgiveness is the means by which I will recognize my innocence. It is the reflection of God's love on earth. It will bring me near enough to heaven that the love of God can reach down and raise me to my home. You know, it's like two planes running side by side. They're going to fuel. They got to get the same speed. We're trying to get our earth man, a lot of what Course in Miracles calls the ego. We're trying to get it to relax so that the true self can step forward. And in the process of doing that, I kind of think of it as that we're kind of refining the ego a little bit and making it be a little bit more in line. That's probably not the best way to look at it, but we're trying to line up the earth man to where he's not he's at least going kind of the same speed. He'll never make his way to heaven, but he'll get close enough in vibration and in sync and in speed that God can reach up and pull us up. All right? He can fill up our tank with truth. Lesson 47, God is the strength in which I trust. It is not my own strength through which I forgive. It is through the strength of God in me, which I am remembering as I forgive. As I begin to see, I recognize his reflection on earth. I forgive all things because I feel the stirring of his strength in me. And I begin to remember the love I chose to forget, but which has not forgotten me. 48, there is nothing to fear. Wow, we need to tell ourselves that more when we're shaking in our boots because someone's done something that's disturbed us. Before we do anything, just remind ourselves there's nothing to fear. Whatever's going on, there's nothing to fear. And then run to your book and find, or run to your thoughts for the day and find your salvation, your peace, your attunement, your plane flying at the same speed as your soul. Find that steady place, and you can then say, there is nothing to fear. How safe the world will look to me when I can see it. It will not look anything like what I imagine I see now. Everyone and everything I see will lean toward me to bless me. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. Can you say that now about everybody you know? Can you say, oh, they're my dearest friend. They're just as dear as everyone else. I know that may sound difficult because of the concepts of specialness that have been so prevalent in our thinking. But we must learn to think more and more like God and see that we're to be friends and with everyone. And if there's somebody that's not your friend, there's your opportunity of practicing forgiveness. Don't withhold it another moment. Offer that forgiveness so that you can be happy and so that the world can be enlightened. Remember, again, tomorrow we're going to study about how you are the light of the world. There is nothing to fear. What could there be to fear in a world which I have forgiven and which has forgiven me? All right. I will recognize in everyone my dearest friend. What could there be to fear in a world which I have forgiven and which has forgiven me? Lesson 49 review. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. There is not a moment in which God's voice ceases to call on my forgiveness to save me. There's not a moment in which his voice fails to direct my thoughts, guide my actions, and lead my feet. I am walking steadily on toward truth. There is nowhere else I can go because God's voice is the only voice and the only guide that has been given to his Son. Remember when Jesus asked the disciples, will you all also go away? And Peter said, whom would we go? Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. He was marching steadily on to truth, just like we are. All right, and then the last review for today. That was, yes. I am sustained by the love of God, lesson 50. As I listen to God's voice, I am sustained by his love. As I open my eyes, his love lights up the world for me to see. As I forgive, his love reminds me that his Son is sinless. And as I look upon the world with the vision he has given me, I remember that I am his son. I don't know, I feel like we need to go back and look at the last lesson one more time before we move forward. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. Let me just read it once again. There is not a moment in which God's voice ceases to call on my forgiveness to save me. There is not a moment in which his voice fails to direct my thoughts, guide my actions, and lead my feet. I am walking steadily on toward truth. There is nowhere else I can go, because God's voice is the only voice and the only guide that has been given to his Son. And again for the last one, I am sustained by the love of God. That's a favorite one I use a lot in my day-to-day life. Just remind myself, I am sustained by the love of God. As I listen to God's voice, I am sustained by his love. As I open my eyes, his love lights up the world for me to see. As I forgive, his love reminds me that his Son is sinless. And as I look upon the world with the vision he has given me, I remember that I am his son. So one more time with all the reviews. God is the love in which I forgive. God is the strength in which I trust. There is nothing to fear. God's voice speaks to me all through the day. and I am sustained by the love of God. And until tomorrow, see all of the rich reasons why you are sustained by the love of God.